It's foolish to think that you can eat the same things when you're older that you can when you're younger. And I'm not talking about from just a metabolic standpoint, I'm talking about from the benefits that you extract from a given food. Yes, the micronutrients still do the same things in the body, but we do need to change what we eat. Here's a simple example. When we're younger, we want to encourage endogenous antioxidant production. What that means is when we're younger, we want to inflict stress through exercise, through fasting, through things like that to trigger a stress response that allows us to become more resilient. When you're older, you still want to do that, but things change. Your ability to repair, your ability to recover diminishes, which means that is a point in time in which a little bit of extra help might be advantageous, right? We're going to talk about the foods that have a lot of data backing them up as far as observational studies go to really align what are the most important things to eat over the age of 50. Okay, so starting with number one, fiber. I know it doesn't sound that exciting. I know it isn't the sexiest thing in the world, but fiber plays such a pivotal role in multiple different things as far as lifespan is concerned. There was an NIH study, a large study, took a look at 567,000 people over the course of 9 years. And this demonstrated that higher fiber led to lower cardiovascular disease risk, lower infections and deaths related to infections, and lower risk of death related to respiratory issues as well. Okay, this was a decrease of 24 to 56%. That is huge, and it is hard to argue with that sample size and that kind of data. The mechanisms behind that are multiple, right? For one, we have the metabolic side of the equation. The more fiber that you eat, the more short-chain fatty acids that you end up having. These short-chain fatty acids play such a pivotal role in how we manage glucose. So from the metabolic side of things, we have to look at how we properly utilize fuels and glucose. And as we get older, if we have a better ability to manage glucose, we have less in the way of advanced glycation end products. We have less in these overall glycolylated proteins. So we end up having less overall glycolation that occurs in general as a result of high levels of glucose. And the mitochondria don't end up starved of fuel. So it plays a role in our metabolism. Now, also when you look at data, there's lower instances of colorectal cancer, which probably has a result of lesser inflammation within the gut. Typically, people that eat higher amounts of fiber have lower levels of weight as well, which plays a huge role when it comes down to lifespan, longevity, and health span. Not to mention that more fiber is going to lead to more in the way of these short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate, which also play a key role in modulating inflammation. As we get older, inflammation goes up, and there's no way around that really. It's going to go up because you have damaged DNA that just happens as a result of aging. This damaged DNA instigates an immune response, i.e. it's called inflammaging, okay? So the more fiber that we eat, the better we can potentially counteract that. A diverse microbiome is important. Probiotics, I also feel play a role. I put a link down below for the one that I recommend. It's a common question that comes up in the comments. What kind of probiotic would I recommend? The one that I personally use and have my family use is called Seed. So I put a link down below. That is a 15% off discount link as well, but you have to use that code. So use code Thomas15 to save 15% off. Really cool technology. You see kind of what's on the screen right now. They have a capsule inside of a capsule. So when it comes down to probiotic technology and symbiotic technology, they're really on the cutting edge, which is really kind of what I look at when I'm vetting out products for myself and for my family. So that link down below, use code Thomas15, save 15% off Seeds probiotic, or technically a symbiotic, in the description down below. This next one is super fascinating, and you don't have to be over 50 to take advantage of it. Okay, this is simply green tea. Now, I could pull out all kinds of different mechanistic BS and tell you all kinds of stuff, but let's get down to the observational data. There was a study that was published in JAMA that took a look at 40,000 Japanese people. And lo and behold, they found that those that consumed 5 or more cups of green tea per day had significant decreases in all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality went down 23% in women, 12% in men. Cardiovascular disease risk went down 31% in women, 22% in men. And stroke risk went down 42% in women and 35% in men. Okay. Again, you cannot really argue with that data. So what is the potential mechanism here? What's going on? There's a number of different things we can look at. One, the polyphenol content is probably a powerful player. When you start looking at people over the age of 50, having some exogenous antioxidant help is not necessarily a bad thing, okay? Clearly we see in this particular pathway, it seems to be helping. Now there's other studies that demonstrate that green tea induces autophagy, right? Which means that helps the cellular recycling process, gets rid of all the garbage in the living room of the cell, right? Clears it up so it can do its job better. That being said, nothing is a stronger driver of autophagy than exercise. But if you're looking at things you can do while you're not exercising, green tea is a pretty powerful player there. Now, as far as the effects of aging on our appearance, there's interesting stuff too. So green tea seems to help with the skin because it maintains collagen levels. The way that it does this is it suppresses something called MMP3. Now MMP3, as we get older, accumulates and eventually it degrades collagen. Now it does this as a normal biological response because as we get older, we do have a degree of muscle protein breakdown that occurs just to sustain life, okay? But when we have muscle protein breakdown, one of the first places it occurs is in various collagen matrices. And this happens through this MMP3 and it breaks down collagen. So if we can preserve collagen by preserving or decreasing the amount of MMP3 that's accumulating, then we have less breakdown of the collagen itself. Not to mention, when you are older and you're worried about sun damage, green tea seems to have potential protective mechanisms against immediate sun damage. So short term, being out in the sun, green tea might help protect your skin a little bit more. Here we go on the other side of the spectrum. You're thinking, okay, he says green tea, so that means I have to opt for green tea instead of coffee. Not necessarily. Two different ways to go about this, apples to oranges, really. There was a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine that took a look at 402,000 people. And this one was over the course of 12 years. Very interesting data. They found that coffee also reduced the risk overall, all-cause mortality. Mechanisms were pretty interesting here too, but let's dive in more. They found that 4 to 5 cups per day was the secret sauce. 4 to 5 cups of coffee per day, right? 16% decrease in all-cause mortality in women and 12% decrease in men. This is super interesting because we would think that caffeine in coffee is a problem. But when you start looking at it like this, you're like, wait a minute, maybe the polyphenols in coffee are actually beneficial. But then you ask the question, was it the caffeine that's causing the issue? Well, when you look at data, you see that decaf coffee has very similar impacts as regular coffee does. So it's probably not the caffeine. If anything, the high concentration of caffeine might be what makes coffee a little bit worse than green tea when you look at the statistics. So the polyphenols in coffee, even with decaf, are still really solid. So there was an interesting study in Cell Cycle that took a look at mice, and it found that almost immediately, whether decaf or regular coffee, it started the autophagic flux process. It started autophagy, triggered autophagy. Now again, this doesn't mean that you get to sit on your bum and not do any activity because you're drinking coffee and you get autophagy. It does mean, however, that when you're looking at it from a cellular recycling process, it's pretty beneficial. Now, what else is interesting, they found that coffee inhibits mTOR. Okay, mTOR is the growth signal. Now, this is good and bad because if we stop or slow mTOR, there is an association there with longevity. But if we stop mTOR, then we're also stopping growth and repair. So where is this balance of having enough mTOR and not having enough mTOR, right? So we need to really look at this. And if you're drinking coffee throughout the course of the day, that could be a problem. Maybe you want to consolidate your coffee towards periods of time where you're fasting and then take the coffee out of the equation when you're not fasting. So you're not inhibiting mTOR while you're actually eating. Now this next one is interesting because when we look at turmeric, there's some controversy with turmeric, right? You probably saw some of the recent stuff coming out saying that almost all the studies talking about turmeric as an anti-inflammatory were seriously flawed or completely falsified. That's interesting stuff. Good thing we're talking about turmeric from a different angle here because I still need to vet that whole piece out. When we look at turmeric, there's a study that was published in Rejuvenation Research that found it was a powerful driver of autophagy. Now, here's how this is potentially working as far as longevity for people over the age of 50. What they've seen in Drosophila, which are specific kinds of flies they use in longevity testing, they found that turmeric curcumin dramatically increased their lifespan. Well, that's a study in a fruit fly, not necessarily in a human, so we can't completely take that to the bank. But we can look at some of the other in vitro and in vivo research that demonstrates how curcumin improves not only, hear me out, mitochondrial biogenesis, but also mitophagy. So you have your mitochondria. As we get older, We want to make sure that our mitochondria is still functioning and strong. And as we get older, just because of DNA damage and just mitochondrial dysfunction, the mitochondria start to become dysregulated, dysfunctional, broken. If we have what is called mitochondrial biogenesis, that means that the mitochondria replicate, get denser, we get more of them. But it happens in a strategy of DNA repair and DNA, like how DNA actually works, right? So if we produce more mitochondria and our mitochondria is dysfunctional, we're only having more dysfunctional mitochondria. However, turmeric also improves mitophagy. So that means that we're repairing mitochondria at the same time as we're causing it to replicate. Meaning we're not just cloning messed up mitochondria, we're essentially cloning somewhat repaired mitochondria. Very, very interesting stuff. And I still stand behind the fact that if you're over the age of 40 or 50, turmeric is something that is only going to be positive when you add it in. This next one is really 4 different things roped into one. But I will say one of the best ways to get almost everything we're talking about would be having a couple ounces of liver a week. It's going to cover a lot of bases and a lot of the things we're talking about here. Because number 5 is actually 4 vitamins and minerals that work together in tandem. You can definitely get these through fruits and veggies. Okay, and when you look at the large data, again, with massive cohorts, you see fruits and vegetables tend to align with more lifespan and health span. But for those that don't necessarily want to increase their carb content a whole lot, I will say that a lot of the vitamins and minerals that we talk about do end up in some organ meats. So in small amounts, that could work well. So first up, within this category, selenium, and there's a kind of a hierarchy of how this works. Selenium removes the reactive oxygen species from the DNA site. Okay, so when the DNA is at risk of damage, you have high amounts of reactive oxygen species there. It gets removed by the selenium. Then zinc comes in, and zinc helps stabilize some of the proteins in the DNA, specifically the things that make up like the ladder rungs. If you're looking at a DNA spiral, those ladder rungs, well, if those are unstable, then that'll cause dysfunctional, sort of impaired DNA as well. So this stabilizes the whole structure of the DNA. Additionally, zinc comes in and lowers inflammation at the DNA site. So you see how selenium comes in and neutralizes, then zinc comes in and does a little bit of repair and stabilization, and then vitamin E comes in. Now, before you go crazy on vitamin E, I've done videos in the past that have talked about how when you're over 50, you should not be supplementing vitamin E, and I stand behind that. Vitamin E should be coming from food sources. Vitamin E, it is a very fine line between too much vitamin E actually quelling your ability to recover. So vitamin E should be coming from foods, and that's one of the few things that I say, hey, when you look at daily recommended allowance of your total levels of vitamin E, follow that. Look at the label of something, see how much vitamin E is in it, and try to aim to get to 100% of that. Don't try to go overboard with supplementation on vitamin E. What this does is it inhibits the lipid peroxidation. So it's protecting the membranes of cells. So now the membranes of a cell are a little bit more resilient, and they're able to stave off reactive oxygen species. They're able to stave off electrons getting stolen and ultimately damaging the DNA there. Then finally, vitamin C. Now it's interesting because vitamin C in a younger individual can be beneficial when you're immunocompromised. Okay, there's all of Linus Pauling's research there that's pretty valid. But as you get older, it becomes more important on the regular. Okay, you are trying to occasionally give yourself a shot in the arm of extra antioxidant help. Essentially, vitamin C sort of acts as a bodyguard for the DNA going forward. So you have this whole process. Get rid of the enemy, protect and reinforce, and then set up establishments around it to continue to protect. So it kind of goes in that order. Selenium, zinc, vitamin E, and vitamin C. As always, keep locking here on my channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.